Welcome back. This time we're talking about Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, a spin-off of the famous Harry Potter series, directed by David Yates, who gave us the final 4 films in that franchise, with a script from author J.K. Rowling herself. This film takes us back to 1920s New York City and focuses on Newt Scamander, a magizoologist that astute Harry Potter fans will recognize as the author of the book Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them that's mentioned multiple times throughout the series. Newt, played by Eddie Redmayne, arrives in the city with a case filled with magical creatures that he's captured from around the world to further his efforts to study them and protect them. Unfortunately, a chance encounter with a muggle named Kowalski, played by Dan Fogler, results in some of his creatures escaping. This puts him in contact with a former magical investigator named Tina, played by Katherine Waterston, as well as her sister Queenie, played by Alison Sudol. He also runs afoul of another investigator named Graves, played by Colin Farrell, who's been looking into a series of attacks around the city, which are now being blamed on his escaped creatures. And that's pretty much all I want to tell you about the story, because the trailers did do a good job of avoiding spoiling a lot of the major plot points. Which is actually a nice segue to 2 revelations that I had about this film, either just before watching it or in its opening moments. And the first is, as a fan of the Harry Potter books, I never saw any of the movies without having already read the book. So this is the first time I've seen any movie based on the writings of J.K. Rowling where I didn't already know what was going to happen. And that was a really fun experience. Now my second revelation is tied to something that I had already realized was a major difference between this film and the Harry Potter works, and that is all the main characters in this movie are adults. It's pretty obvious if you watch any of the trailers. What I didn't realize until we got into the meat of the first act was that none of our characters are learning how to use magic. They're all adults with jobs, and they know what they're doing. Which means both that the action sequences are great because everyone knows how to use magic, and it also gives us some really nice slice of life moments when we get to see what it would be like for wizards to live in 1920s New York City. And it's these moments, combined with a compelling story, great performances, and the solid direction that we've come to expect from David Yates, that result in this being an incredibly entertaining movie. Both as a new and different look at the wizarding world that we've come to love, as well as just a solid film in its own right. I think fans are going to love this movie, and I think newcomers can come in and enjoy it just as much, because you really don't need to know that much about the wizarding world. And because we do have veterans from the original franchise, like Yates, involved in this production, it does feel like a cohesive whole, only with the addition of 1920s aesthetics, which, as far as I'm concerned, is almost always a plus. My biggest concern going into this movie was the fact that it had been announced recently that this was going to become a 5-film series. We already knew that there were going to be 3, but now with 5, the question was how much of this film was just going to serve as setup for the subsequent stories. What had made me hopeful was J.K. Rowling, because despite the fact that Harry Potter was a 7-book series, each book felt like its own. It didn't feel like it was setting up other things. Of course, there were certain plot threads that were being developed as the long-term storyline was going forth, but each book felt like a solid narrative in its own. And this film does as well. Although there are some moments that could be setting up things for future development. And obviously I can't get into that without spoiling the movie, so I'm not really going to say anything else about that. Now, as far as any negatives, there's one storyline that's pretty important to this movie, and it gets resolved a lot quicker than I thought, and it, again, trying to be vague, it results in some other things happening, and because of that, the film never really has the time to go back to give us sort of an emotional resolution to that story. And that's probably my biggest negative for this film, and it's not a huge one, because as I said before, I really enjoyed this movie, and I thought it was a great addition to the franchise, a great beginning to a new franchise, and a film that I think both fans of Harry Potter and those that are new to the stories can really enjoy. So if you've seen Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, what did you think about it? Try to keep your comments spoil-free. I might try to do a more spoiler-filled review. I'm going to go see the movie again before the weekend is out. As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my reviews, and until next time, I'll see you at the movies.